And now beginning part 4 of the scratching tutorial. And now we are going to begin basic form-in line art. Basically now we're going to create a very rough image of what we are going to create. We're actually going to start using the tools we've now learned. We're actually going to start creating that little guy we've created on paper. There's going to be 2 basic methods I'm going to show you here today. One of them I like to call blotchy method, the other I call doodly method. Neither of those names are probably official. In fact, I'm probably looking like a big idiot by calling them that, but I don't have art majors. I am not all up to date with all the terminology that there is. We're going to start off with blotchy method. Take your paper, put it next to your computer somewhere where you can see it, and get ready. What we're going to want to do with blotchy method is we're going to create a lot of blotches that resemble various parts on our little Fakemon here, or whatever sprite you might be doing. It's a good idea to understand a bits of anatomy and things like that. If you're creating a human, know what a human looks like, especially in the sprite style you're doing. And it's a good idea to know if you're doing an animal, what its anatomy is like, and where its bones and muscles, and where it bulges and where it doesn't bulge, and all those wonderful little details you might want to learn before you actually start this. There's plenty of images, and for the most part, you'll probably be creating something that has some form somewhere that somebody's drawn or something similar. So if you're doing a dog, go look what a dog looks like. If you're doing our little creature here, go, search up, its base animal and, see what that looks like and what it should look like. And now, one very important step when spriting is you need to know the size of what you're going to sprite. It's actually fairly important in that regard that you know exactly how much room you have, since certain games have different limitations for the sprite that you're making. What I typically do is I make a box according to the dimensions of the sprite. Pokemon sprites, in this case, are 64 by 64 typically. If you're doing a different generation, it depends on which generation. Diamond and Pearl and other 4th generation games typically use a 80 by 80 frame. So you want to make a box that's, well, I make it 66 by 66 so I can fill the entire inside. Different games will have different limitations though, so definitely know what you're doing before you go into it. So we're going to want to actually take the big paintbrush tool. We're not getting exact. We're going to want to just get one of these, this little guy. I always use this one right here. And we're going to pick a nice bright color. Don't pick black, pick orange, purple, blue, something like that. And create the basic shape of your person's body. Something that's taught in a lot of normal art is everything you make should be made up of smaller little shapes. A lot of round little circles, ovals, cylinders, things like squares even. A lot of stuff like that. So we're going to make our giant blotch here. And next we're going to add a different blotch. Change up your color, something different. Don't make it blend in or match all that well. And let's make the head now. Giant round thing right there on top of the body area. Do that there. So we're keeping that within there. Next we're going to want to add various other things. A lot of times I like to make hips a different color. I'll make the tail a different color. We got the legs. We'll even make the feet a different color. And we'll get basically this little blotch that very, very roughly looks like what we've created. And I'm going to take a moment here. We actually now have something created on our program. Now, to avoid issues of power outages or, oh whoops, your brother came downstairs and kicked a hole through your computer screen and now your computer's on fire and oh no, you've lost all your progress. We don't want that to happen. So what we want to do is periodically save. Normally it shouldn't be too hard to describe to someone how to save something, but when it comes to spriting, I have seen many people screw it up because there is a very specific thing you want to do. And I can't stress it enough. And you better do this right after I'll explain it, because I'm going to explain it a lot of times throughout this. We go into our file. We click Save As. It's nothing different than any other program. We go find our folder. Maybe we'll make a new folder for this guy. We'll make a little Fakemon folder. We got a couple little Fakemon in there. Be very careful down here near file name. You can give it a name, but as you can see, it wants to save it as a .jpg. That's the file type right here. A JPEG, a JPEG, a JPG. We don't want to save it as that. If I see anybody saving it as that, I'm going to think you're a horrible person. You do not save a sprite as a JPEG. Never, ever. JPEGs will blur up the image. JPEGs will keep things very unexact. You never, ever save a sprite as JPEG. Always save a sprite as either .png or .gif, or png and gif as I usually call them. Png and gif will keep the sprite looking the way it's supposed to. Saving it as a JPEG will not. Saving it as a 24-bit map would be stupid. 16-color bitmap is stupid. Anything but png and gif are generally pretty stupid. There is no reason I can think of that you want to save it as anything else if we're just using basic MS Paint here. So you want to save it as one of those two formats. Always save as png, always, or GIF. Never JPEG. JPEG's just awful. Now, we got it saved. We're actually now going to take a break from this. We got our basic blotch. The two styles kind of forge into one after this point, so what I'm going to do is just select it over and make it over on the side. We're now going to go do what I refer to as the doodly style. Rather than making giant blotches, some people just want to kind of get more of the form around. This will be a lot more similar to if you're actually doodling it. You take your pencil tool, and you actually just draw your image. In this case, you can start with something like the head. You know, give it its basic form. Don't be too afraid if you draw it wrong. I mean, you can go back and change a little bit of it, but for the most part, just go with it. Don't worry too much about exactness. Draw your form, get your body in, kind of give the curve, get your legs in, look at your doodle, pay attention to your anatomy. I mean, this is very similar to the other method, but rather than making giant blotches that we're going to have to clear up later, we're just going to kind of draw its basic shape. This is not anywhere close to final. Don't be afraid to, you know, just keep it bad right now. We're going to fix it later. No reason we have to rush anything. And there, we have a basic doodly form. We have two very basic forms that both resemble what we've doodled and what we've planned. It is now time to make them more exact. We're now out of the basic form and we're going into true line art. Line art is basically the borders, the shape, the things like that. It's going to be very important. We cover a lot of different things. With the blotchy style. A blotchy style is real good since it gets our shape a lot easier. However, line art becomes a little more difficult since we now have to outline it. We have something to go by though, and that's really nice, and the size and proportions will be a lot easier at this point because we can change up the proportions now, and if we realize, oh wait, we made the head too big, we can cut in on the head and do things like that, and it's going to actually be easier in some respects, harder in others. And it's all going to be personal preference, really. A lot of times I don't bother with blotchy style. I think blotchy style works out real well. It's just something, I just go straight to line art because I'm lazy. If that's good or bad, it's hard to say. I'm used to doing line art. It's just the way I've been spriting. It's not necessarily wrong or bad to do it the other way or this way. And really try out both, see what you like, see what you get better results with. And now that we've basically done something pretty similar to line art, but with, you know, the more appropriate proportions, we want to get rid of all those undercolors. We don't really need those, so we're going to get rid of them. Remember before when I taught you the eraser tool, simply choose the color of one of your blotches, make your secondary your background color, and get rid of those. It's a lot easier this way just because the lines are separating it, so the paint bucket tool can't be really used all that well, and they're too large to really do anything. We don't want to screw up the line art by using some large blotchy tool or anything like that, so the eraser tool actually comes in a lot of use right here. Now we have a line art pretty similar to our other one, however our proportions are probably a little bit better. But we're not done with the other one either. At this point, if you were doing the doodly style, you'd go in and actually fix things up. Oh no, one of the legs is too fat, or oh no, one of the, you know, wings are not the right size, or something like that. This is now when we can fix that, or when we should fix it. And we can edit, oh, this line's too far out, erase it, make it more in, this one's at the wrong angle, curve it more. things like that. That's where we're going to do stuff like this to the line, or the doodly style. And now we have two fairly proper. I'm going to ditch this one just because, not because of the method, just because I didn't do it as well. I probably... Okay, we'll just take this one. We don't need both of ours. Let's make a copy of it. We're going to be doing some changes now to our creature, so let's actually just take this line art, highlight, copy, put it over to the side. This way, if we screw something up now, we can always go back to that. Also, we can save again. Since we've already saved as Pinge, I hope you saved as Pinge, we can just hit normal save and just save it that way. We now want to smooth out what we've done. As you can see, a lot of the lines are thick, and depending on the style, you know, maybe they're supposed to be that thick, but for the most part, especially for doing Pokemon, we're going to want to thin those out. And we're going to want to, you know, make sure the curves are done right. Okay. Circles and curves are done in a very specific way when spriting. You cannot use the auto tools like the curve tool or the circle tool. Both won't properly make circles for you. Although on a zoomed out stance, they may look okay, when zoomed in, they are not okay. It's very important to keep them all right, because if you don't, it's going to not work, and this is very important. We have some very basic shapes here, so what I'm about to show you won't always be the exact same pattern for doing curves, so you really have to get a feel for what the curve is supposed to look like on the individual sprite you're working on. However, the basic idea works the same in all of it. Now, when we look at these pre-made circles and such that MS Paint produced for us, you can kind of see that the lines go in this jarred type style. It's not very round, so what we want to actually do is alter it so the curve is more smooth. What I typically like to do is I like to use a numbering pattern. Let's alter this top left corner here and do this and that. Okay, as you can see, it actually rounded out a bit. The ideal with a circle is counting the pixels per line. As you can see, there are a bunch up here, about, looks like 6 or so. And then I altered it, rather than going down to 1 pixel long, I altered it down to 2 pixels long. And then after that, it goes to being 1 pixel long. And then it goes back to 2, then it goes up to 6 again. That's what creates this much more smooth curve. Over here, though, where it's the pre-made one, as we can see, it goes down to that 1, then it's this 2 that connects into another 2, then a 1, and then a 6. It's not very smooth. Another thing that you can typically do is, obviously, if you need that curve to be wider perhaps, maybe do something along the lines of, let's delete a couple lines here. We can make it something like a 3, a 2, a 1, a 1, a 2, and a 3. Typically on something like a circle, the pattern will repeat itself once it's hit that 45-degree mark. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you just have a long curve like this. What Paint generated for us is kind of too straight in some areas. So what we want to do is go, okay, these 2 2s look fine, but then it eventually has to start growing longer. So let's use a 3 there, delete that, move it up to 4. Typically it's a little exponential in growth, so we're not even going to do one with 5 long. Let's just skip to 6 long. Get a number that's maybe in between there. And we have a much more gradual curve there. Over here, it turns too sharply, so let's add a pixel in there, shorten that a little, add that to 2, make that a 3. Looking at this, now this curve maybe is not right, so we can go back and change that. It's all about gradually changing, going in that pattern. Typically there are a few situations maybe where it works, but really something like a 1, 2, 1 isn't going to look right. Something 1, 3, 2, 5 is definitely not going to look right. Those just don't work as curves. It's too jagged. You have to be gradual in that alteration. So, keeping that in mind when it comes to lines, go through and delete all the thickness. You can continue to edit what you've created. Making sure the sizes and things are all to what you want them to be, but also go through and get those lines. Make sure the curves are right. Keep things, gradually go into 1s and 2s, like I've mentioned, just to make sure things are the proper roundness. Keep a steady hand and go through and do this all throughout the sprite. You'll basically get that very solid line, and it's actually going to start looking like what you want it to look like. It's actually now taking proper form. We are getting the line art for what we are going to create. That basically concludes this portion now. We have our line art. Took us a while. Don't expect this to go too quick. And also, we are not done. We're going to want to change it a bit. Right now, we think it looks good. Trust me, it's probably going to change. You're probably going to go, no, I don't like that foot, or I don't like how that tail is curved. We're going to change it, but that's okay. We can get to that later. Now we're actually going to go on to coloring and shading. This is kind of a huge part, so be ready.